Regressions. Subject: Nathan. Nathan had vomited twice in his room earlier. With every fibre of his being, he did not want to return to the machine, to the arm, to see the hauntingly beautiful, slightly sad, yet implacable visage of Sophia Ricken staring up at him before he was plunged into the maelstrom of violence, passion, and contemptibleness that was the assassin Duncan Walpole. But he wanted even less to become like those poor lost things in the Infinity Room. So he had agreed to go this time. Sophia smiled and said she was glad he was there, that he had decided to come of his own free will, that she was sure there would be only a few more regressions before he'd be done. Tears had poured down his face as he nodded sickly at her. "I hate him. I hate Duncan Walpole. I hate how he treats people and his awful arrogance and greed. I hate him because he's too much like me, and I want to be better than that." Regression. London, 1714. Duncan Walpole's head felt like someone was using it for an anvil, but that, in and of itself, was nothing new. He tended to experience the sensation most mornings. He had learned that a visit to Blake's coffee house as soon as he, sometimes literally, rolled out of bed was usually a wise idea. All the rage, coffee was a thick and sludgy beverage, and Walpole had said more than once to anyone who would listen that he never knew whether to drink it, dip a pen in it and write a letter, or pour the stuff in a chamber pot. But it was hot and reviving and addictive, and it cleared his head sufficiently that he could then attend to whatever business was required by either of his masters, the East India Company or the assassins. London boasted over 3,000 of the shops, and every one of them had their own personalities and clientele, and more than once Duncan had learned something that would be to the benefit to either or both of the organizations he worked for. And with that done, he could then turn his attention back to drinking and patronizing the local brothel. Sometimes, conveniently, the two businesses operated out of the same site. He fancied both the ale and the whores offered by the Rose of England tavern in Covent Garden. It had a leg up, as it were, as far as Duncan was concerned, in that it had a separate room below ground where cockfighting was conducted. Not nearly as satisfactory a pastime as bull-baiting, of course, but at least some blood sport was to be had while one held an ale in one hand and a wench in the other. The knock on his door sent spikes through his temples, and he hissed. "Go away!" he shouted, then winced afresh at how loud his own voice sounded. "Your pardon, sir, but I've a message," came a youthful voice from the other side of the door. Duncan groaned in recognition. He propped himself up, blinking, finding the light to be too intense even with the shutters closed. He sat for a moment on the edge of the bed, observing that he'd forgotten to remove his breeches before unconsciousness last night. He reached for one of the coins he'd dumped on the small, elegant table, then got to his feet, padded to the door with one hand pressed to his pounding head, and pulled it open. Geoffrey was more than likely ignorant of the true nature of his employers. It was safer for the boy that way. All he needed to know was that he was well paid, and the only services asked of him were those of a courier delivering messages and packages. He was 8, with bright blue eyes and locks of curly blonde hair. The oft-overused word cherubic was, in this case, most definitely applicable. Duncan wondered idly if Geoffrey realized that the generous pay the assassins gave him kept him from falling in with other more unscrupulous men who might take advantage of the angelic child. "Stay your blade from the flesh of the innocent" was one of the creed's tenets, and once it had been one Walpole cherished. Now, less idealistic than he had been over a decade ago when he joined them, he was still glad of that as he looked at the boy. Children didn't deserve what London, indeed the world, sometimes offered them. "Sorry to wake you, sir, but I've a message and was told it was important."
Randall thinks it's important to know when one of his assassins takes a piss,
Walpole thought, but did not say. Speaking took energy he didn't possess right now, so he simply nodded, leaned against the doorframe, and waved for the boy to continue.
He says
You are to meet him to dine on fish at 1 o'clock, the boy said, adding with obvious reluctance, and, you're to be sober. At the expression on Walpole's face, he added hastily, if it please you, sir. Duncan let out an exasperated sound. Like Randall himself, the message was clear and to the point.
I don't think he actually said that last part, did he?
Well, no, sir. Not the if it please you part, at any rate.
Good lad. Don't lie. At least not to me, eh?
Duncan tossed the boy a coin and started to close the door. Pardon, sir, but I was particularly instructed to wait for a reply. Duncan swore colourfully. Should I tell him that then, sir?
Ah, wouldn't that be nice, Duncan thought. No, you probably shouldn't. Tell him I'll be there.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And the boy scurried off down the stairs. Duncan leaned against the door. His London lodgings were small but elegant, located on Tottenham Court Road, although he seldom spent much time here. Conscious time, at least. Nonetheless, whether it was consciously appreciated or not, the lavishness was not inexpensive. He trudged to the table and picked up his pocket watch, a gift from his second cousin, Robert Walpole, upon his 21st birthday. The two had never been particularly close, but Duncan was fond of the watch. He had no other meetings at East India House until the afternoon, and it was only 10:17 now. Plenty of time to call for a hot bath and visit the coffee house before his meeting with the assassin mentor. Dine on fish meant to meet outside Mrs. Salmon's waxworks in Fleet Street. It was an extraordinarily popular attraction. For a halfpenny or thereabouts, one could stand in the presence of wax versions of royalty, from King Charles I upon the scaffold to the warrior queen Boadicea, and experience such lurid scenes as Canaanite women sacrificing children to the god Moloch, or the inside of a Turkish harem. A fairly realistic figure of a crippled child greeted visitors outside the door. Duncan was peering at it, grinning, when he sensed the mentor's presence behind him, followed by the familiar, cool, clipped voice. "You're late."
Damn you, I'm here now,
Walpole said, standing and turning to face the mentor.
And I'm sober. That should count for something at least.
Randall's hair was iron grey, his eyes pale blue. Never known for his sense of humour, his lips were usually little more than a thin line. Now they were pressed together so tightly his mouth almost disappeared until he spoke. "It counts for less every time, Duncan, and if you address me like that again, it will be the last time." Duncan stepped away from the lines thronging to get in as he spoke.
You wouldn't kill a master assassin for having colourful language, he said.
No, Randall replied, but one who is also unreliable, erratic, disrespectful, and drunk half the time.
Even so.
Randall sighed, clasping his hands behind him and looking out at the busy street. What happened to you, man? 13 years ago when we met, you were all on fire to make a difference, to make things better. You despised the exclusivity the Templars stood for and their desire to control everyone and everything. You believed in freedom. His blue eyes were melancholy.
I still do, Duncan snapped, but 13 years can change a man. The Brotherhood is no different from the army. You say pretty things, Randall, but in the end there's a rank and everybody has to answer to it.
Of course we do. Only someone who had known Randall as long as Walpole had would have noticed the man was distressed. His voice, always calm and precise, was even more so now. Duncan, you're one of the smartest people I know. You understand what we're up against. You know that we need good coordination. I must be able to rely on my people to carry out their missions as planned, not turn them into spur-of-the-moment tavern brawls. We, all of us, work in the dark to serve the light. We don't get our names engraved on plaques or statues erected in our honour. Those trappings are for the Templars, and well do we know such frippery is transient and hollow. He sighed slightly and shook his head. The work we do is our legacy. Randall continued in a gentler tone. Our names aren't important. All that matters is what we leave behind. Duncan felt a hot wave of fury surge through him, and he tamped it down. Calmly, carefully, he said,
Did you send Geoffrey to bring me here to scold me? He's the one who's 8 years old, not I.
And he took a step forward, towering over the smaller man,
will not be spoken to in such a way. I am a master assassin.
Yes, you are, and I am your mentor. Oh, and that was a warning if there ever was one. Their eyes met, and for a fraction of a heartbeat, Duncan actually considered taking him down right there. It was the same everywhere Duncan went. The Navy was like this. The aristocracy was like this. One was stuck where one was, no matter what one did. Even the assassins, who extolled individuality, were hypocrites in the end.
My apologies, mentor,
he said, placing a hand on his heart and bowing.
I am here, and I am sober. Why did you summon me?
Summon. It was an accurate word, like a dog to heel. Philip's cool gaze seemed to bore into him as he spoke. I have a new assignment for you. We've received word from Tabai in Tulum. There are rumors that another sage has appeared, and Tabai has reached out to us and others for aid in tracking him down.
No, Walpole thought. He can't be saying what I think he's saying.
Tabai was a Mayan assassin, mentor of the Brotherhood in the Caribbean. He was the son of an assassin and had grown up in the Brotherhood, and all reports of him and his instruction had been excellent. Randall had spoken ere now of trying to strengthen ties with the Caribbean Brotherhood, feeling that the aptly named New World, still quite new, would eventually become a seat of power for the Templars, and therefore would need assassins to keep them in check. But Tulum was 5,000 miles away, in the jungle and set amid ruins, and there were no coffeehouses, no taverns, no whores, and as Walpole well knew from his days in the Royal Navy, if there was any grog to be had, it would be horrible. There would be no fame and no fortune, and if Randall wanted him to go there... We don't have a strong presence in the New World yet, at least not as strong as we'd like. Tabai can help us change that. I'd like you to assist him in the hunt for the sage and continue your training under him. Duncan blinked.
I'm sorry. I must be misunderstanding you, because I could have sworn that you just told a master assassin to go get more training from a primitive...
Randall's hand shot out so fast Duncan didn't even see it coming, and he was reminded just why this mild-seeming, unprepossessing man was the mentor. He felt his cheeks flame with embarrassment and anger as Randall gripped his arm tightly, strong fingers pressing in at precisely the right spots to cause extreme pain without causing damage. You will take the missions you are given, and you will give them your best, that mentor said. His voice was as calm and conversational as ever. If the Templars find this sage before we do, they will have a terrible weapon to use against us and humanity. Tabai knows things the rest of us could all stand to learn, and I believe he could teach you how to control that temper of yours as well. The term sage referred to an individual who was a particularly powerful descendant of the precursors, the creators of the artifacts like apples of Eden that could give an individual or an organization a great deal of power. Randall was right. This was important. But the implication that Walpole needed training after almost a decade and a half as an assassin...
The East India Company values me,
Walpole said, a touch too harshly.
They won't be happy if I suddenly disappear.
That's another reason I'm sending you. We believe that you have attracted unwanted notice, and you and we may be in danger. Tender your resignation and tell them you need more adventure and independence. They'll believe you. That got Walpole's attention. The East India Company, with its de facto monopoly on imports of spices, silks and other textiles, and tea, unsurprisingly attracted its share of Templars. For years, Duncan had been watching its employees, trying to determine who was and who wasn't a Templar. He had narrowed it down to a few suspects, but it was a man he had never considered whom Randall had recently confirmed as member of the hated order. Henry Spencer, Esquire, one of the newest members of the EIC's powerful Court of Directors. Duncan knew the man only in passing, of course. Walpole had started out as a sailor, but even though he'd risen in the company, he'd seldom had cause to interact with one of the directors. Spencer was a soft, doughy man with pink cheeks and a small red mouth seemingly permanently set in a jovial smile. He seemed utterly harmless. Duncan wondered how it was that Spencer had deduced his association with the assassins, and he was vexed that not once had the man's name floated in his consciousness as a member of the domineering and selfish Templar order. Although all the points Randall raised had validity, they also emphasized one cold and unpleasant fact. As long as Walpole operated within the tenets of the Brotherhood, he would never achieve the honours and wealth that he felt were his due. And he knew that, despite Randall's words about all of them standing to benefit from training with the Mayan mentor, he was the only one of all of them Randall felt could use it. On some level, it was a rebuke. He would have none of it.
I'm not going.
Of course you're not, Randall said, affably, surprising him.
You're angry with me. You feel slighted. You and I have danced this gavotte before, Duncan. But you're a good man, and I think you still believe in the goals and philosophy of the Brotherhood.
His thin lips curled in the rarest of smiles.
Why else do you think we've put up with you as long as we have? You'll come around. You always do. You're lucky we're in a public place, old man, Duncan hissed, or you'd be dead where you stand.
Indeed. This spot was chosen deliberately. You don't acquire the rank of mentor without wisdom, Randall said wryly. Take some time to cool that hot head of yours, Duncan, and we'll talk again when you're ready. This could be an enormous opportunity for you, if you'll just step out of your own way long enough to see it.
You're about to see my arse, and you may kiss it if you like,
Duncan shot back as he turned and stalked off, seething with fury and wounded pride. He spent the day sulking at India House, where, as luck would have it, the weekly meeting of the Court of Directors was occurring, and the rotund Henry Spencer, Esquire, was in attendance. As the man departed, Duncan decided to go on the offence. He followed Spencer's carriage through the streets of London, waiting patiently as he stopped at his inn before leaving again to dine with other members of the Court of Directors, and then, finally, presumably, settling in for the evening at one of the more respectable taverns. Walpole feigned a double-take as he spotted Spencer sitting alone, puffing on a long-stemmed clay pipe and reading one of the seemingly hundreds of pamphlets that littered the city.
Henry Spencer, Esquire, isn't it?
He gave a little bow as the man looked up.
Duncan Walpole, at your service. I have the honour of working for your fine company.
Ah, yes, Spencer exclaimed, his pink face beaming as if this was the nicest thing in the world. Your name's been bandied about, Mr. Walpole. Have a seat. Have a seat. Care for some sherry? Without waiting for an answer, he made eye contact with one of the servers, and she brought over an extra glass, blushing prettily as she set it down before Duncan. He was more than a little disappointed that he wasn't simply tavern-crawling tonight, but made a note of her for the future.
There goes a pretty piece, he said. Too bad she's not on the menu.
Oh, I'm sure for the right fellow everything is permitted, Spencer said, and let his gaze linger on Walpole's just a moment too long before taking another pull on his pipe. And all of a sudden, he didn't look quite so harmless. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. Part of the assassin's creed. Walpole didn't react, but his pulse quickened. So, Randall had been right. He had been sniffed out. Most of the time, Duncan was a hothead, and he had never denied it. But sometimes he went cold, as if that hot head had been plunged into an icy pool, and he knew that aspect of his personality was even more frightening. The cold settled into him now as he regarded Spencer, and he gave the Templar a pleasant grin.
Good thing, too, eh? I won't tell if you won't.
Of course not, Spencer said. We're gentlemen and employees of Britain's finest company. I'm certain we'll both take any indiscretions we observe to the grave.
Oh, how right you are. Well, in that case, I highly recommend Rose of England. Ask for Jessamine.
They talked idly of the price of silk and tea, and whether it would ever become quite as popular as coffee. Perhaps, Spencer said, although I rather hope it may remain the preferred beverage of gentlemen. Let the riffraff continue to swill the vile concoction. It was ludicrous, but that was the offhand comment which cemented Henry Spencer's fate in Duncan's eyes. Spencer would die tonight. Walpole bided his time, playing cards and drinking until Spencer got up to leave. His eyes on his cards, Duncan heard the Templar declining the offer of a carriage ride home, saying his lodgings were not far and it was a pleasant night. Duncan gave him enough of a head start so that the bastard wouldn't suspect, then cashed in his cards and followed. Although it had been 10 years since Michael Cole's patented globular lights had been first lit outside of St. James's Coffee House, the lamps were still not widely implemented, and the London streets were dark. But the half-moon provided more than enough illumination for Duncan to observe Spencer trundling up ahead along the street, lantern in hand. Walpole followed on the street for a bit, then ducked into an alley, shinnied easily up the stone side of another tavern, and leapt lightly on the slate roof to continue the pursuit from above. His quarry was enveloped in a faint scarlet nimbus, and Duncan grinned. Why had he not done this before? It was far too easy. He ran lightly along the roof, springing from one to the next as chimneys from the taverns, gaming houses and whorehouses sent black smoke up into the air. Then he paused. Far too easy. Damn it. Was he walking into a trap? For a moment he thought about abandoning his pursuit of the pudgy, solitary figure huffing purposefully along. Perhaps he should go back to Randall and accept the mission. It might not be that bad. But of course it would be that bad. A long, difficult, unpleasant sea voyage with nothing but jungle, ruined temples and lots of training. No. He would not go slinking back to Randall like a dog with its tail between its legs. Grimly, he continued on. Spencer turned a corner and vanished into an alleyway. Unless the fellow was about to unbutton and take a piss, this really was a bad idea for a wealthy gentleman. Which, of course, meant that this really was a trap. Duncan wasn't sure how, as the man was alone, but if he knew it was a trap, then it ceased to be one. In for a penny, in for a pound, he thought, flicked his wrists to activate his hidden blades, and sprang. Ordinarily, Walpole would have impaled the man's throat upon contact, but not this time, especially as he realized that Henry Spencer, Esquire, was standing, trousers quite properly buttoned, looking up expectantly and making no move to escape as the assassin sprang upon him. Such confidence was impressive, and as he landed squarely upon the fleshy Templar, Duncan merely pressed the blade to the man's throat. "You knew I'd follow you," he said. "I certainly hoped you would," Spencer answered. Duncan blinked. Keeping his blades to the man's throat, he looked about. They were completely alone. Intrigued, he said, "You don't strike me as one eager to die." "Oh, no, indeed." "And yet I am going to kill you, Templar." Spencer smiled. "Not quite yet, I think. You're a smart fellow, Walpole. I'm offering you a proposition that might interest you." Abruptly, Walpole laughed. "I'm not moving my blades," he said, "but I'll let you speak before I cut your throat." "This is a trifle uncomfortable, but as you wish. I wasn't the only Templar in that tavern. We know you're an assassin, and we have for some time. You may kill me right here and now, but you wouldn't get far." "Leaping from rooftop to rooftop are the Templars now?" No, but we do have eyes everywhere, and you'd never dare approach anyone in the company again. Quite the loss. Duncan scowled. Go on. We've been watching you for some time. I don't know how the assassins treat you, but I know that you've been passed over for promotion within the company. And if you were truly content with the Brotherhood, you'd never have hesitated to kill me just now, suspected trap or no. Damn the man's eyes. He was right. Duncan made a decision. He swung himself off the man, getting to his feet and extending his hand to help Spencer to his. The man's grip was strong, though his hands were soft and damp. I can easily take him if I don't like what he says, Duncan reasoned. Are you offering me a position? At the East India Company? No. You'll fare better and rise higher if you join the Templars. Pride in one's work and recognition and advancement for it are not flaws in one's character, to our way of thinking. The wording took Duncan aback. He realized that the assassins did indeed look upon his ambition as a flaw, and the revelation was surprisingly painful. He said nothing for a moment. Spencer held his tongue, not pressing him. At last, Duncan Walpole said quietly, The mentor of the Caribbean Brotherhood has heard rumours of a sage. Spencer inhaled quickly. That information is indeed extraordinarily helpful. Walpole took the next step. That could be just the beginning. Duncan looked up at the coffeehouse's sign, a golden pot of the beverage against a red background, with two long-stemmed clay pipes crossing one another below it. He gazed down the street. The day was clear enough that he could see the Tower of London, which gave the cobbled street its name. He peered through the wavy glass of Lloyd's coffeehouse. Randall was inside, as was his wont at this hour, listening to the news brought by the executives of shipping companies, their sailors, and the merchants who sold the goods they brought. For a moment, Walpole stood outside, hesitating. His head hurt, and the coffee would help it, and it was time to finish what he'd begun last night. Time to stick a different kind of hidden blade into the mentor's heart. One the man would, if Duncan Walpole played his cards right, never feel until it was far too late. Randall looked up as he entered, one grey eyebrow quirking in mild surprise. "Good morrow, Duncan," he said. "You look sober." "I am," he said, "but I am in want of coffee. I've thought about what you said, and you're right. One should never settle for being good enough. One should strive to become the best, and if I can learn from Atabai and help the Brotherhood, then I should do so." Something that looked like real affection flickered across Philip Randall's aquiline features. "I know how difficult it is for you to swallow your pride, Duncan," he said, almost kindly. He waved down a server who brought an extra cup and filled the empty receptacle with the steamy, hot, thick black liquid. As he accepted the beverage, the traitor to the creed said to his mentor, smiling, "It goes down easier with coffee." Subject: Emir. Regression: Constantinople, 1475. Yusuf Tazim, 8 years old, stared out at the port of Constantinople, his eyes as big as 2 full moons, and his mouth a perfect circle of astonishment. It had already been a journey bursting with wonders, travelling from Bursa, where he had been born, to this ferry, and then over a vast expanse of water. He had never been more than a mile from home before in his life. His mother, Nalan, stood beside him, smiling as she placed a hand on her son's narrow shoulder. "Do you see? I told you that Constantinople had something Bursa didn't have." She had come into their rooms 3 nights ago, her slender, strong body awkward with tension, as she told him they needed to travel to Constantinople right away. It was odd and frightening, and he had not wanted to leave. It had been just the 2 of them all Yusuf's young life. He had never known his father, and all the asking in the world about What had happened to him served the boy little, save for the reassurance that his father had not wanted to leave his wife or his son, and was, more than likely, not going to be able to return to them. There were stories, though, that his mother would share with him, tales of his laughter and kindness, and the warmth in his smile. "You are much like him, my child," Nalan would say, and her eyes would somehow be happy, while still haunted by sorrow. Now, however, there were no shadows in his mother's eyes. Whatever it was that had caused her to want to depart Bursa so quickly had, it seemed, been left behind in that city. "Are you glad you came, my little lion?" Looking out at the approaching harbour and the buildings that crowded behind it, tall and proud and colourful against the blue of the sky, Yusuf considered the question. It was not so far away that he could not return one day, should he so desire, his mother had pointed out while she packed their meagre belongings. He did not like to think of how they had left, or wonder why. His usual good nature asserted itself, and as the vessel drew closer to port, with the sounds of the ropes slapping against the ship's hull, and the sight of small figures scurrying to greet it and bring it in safely, Yusuf nodded. "Yes," he announced, "I am." The voice penetrated Emir's consciousness. It was female, cool, in complete control, kind but with no true compassion. But the more he focused on it, the more his head hurt. "This tells us nothing of import. We know he was a troublemaker as a child, but this seems to be too young to get into much mischief." "I wouldn't count on that," a male voice this time, clipped, dry, to the point. "Apparently, something significant happened within his first year here." Emir didn't want to hear this. Somehow he knew it was dangerous, knew it could lead to— "Can you narrow it down to a specific date?" "Yes. Hang on. There. That's got it." Bursa was the second largest city in the Ottoman Empire, so Constantinople or Constantini or Istanbul, a recent local name for the great port city, did not dazzle the boy quite so much as it might have if he had been born in a distant village. He knew his way around street corners, alleyways, tunnels, and areas that he knew his mother would not like to know he visited. But while Bursa had certainly been large and bustling, Istanbul was the capital city of the Ottoman Empire and offered much more. It was a hub of commerce and activity, where merchants and sailors and travellers, innkeepers and mercenaries, soldiers and beggars all intersected in a noisy, colourful, fragrant and vibrant collage. People of all walks of life, of all cultures and religions were welcome, indeed encouraged to come to the city. Yusuf had always felt that his mother prepared the best sweets anyone had ever tasted. In Bursa, where she worked in the market, her kimal pasa, a dessert made with unsalted sheep's cheese, flour, eggs and butter rolled into walnut-sized pieces and then cooked in lemon syrup, was unrivalled. So he was not at all surprised that once a local vendor, a jovial, corpulent man named Bakir bin Salih, had tasted it, he hired her after the first bite. Yusuf's tasks initially were what they had been in Bursa, to help his mother obtain the ingredients needed to prepare the kimal pasa, to draw customers to the stall and to deliver cloth-wrapped packages of the delicious treats to customers all over the city. He sometimes took different routes than most people would, choosing to go over or under rather than through the city. On one such adventure, as he climbed like a monkey onto a rooftop to get an absolutely glorious view of the city, he observed something strange. Certain roofs had poles erected on them. Attached to the poles were ropes that stretched from higher buildings to lower ones. What were these for? Sometimes cords were strung to dry clothing or to hang banners, but these were thick and solid. They could easily support a man's weight, and he discovered it certainly supported his as he went carefully, hand over hand, from one rooftop to another. Who had put them up? What were they for? He wondered about them every time he looked up. But there was a more pressing problem than who had erected the rooftop ropes. As the months stretched on, it became apparent to Yusuf that although his mother was able to feed them, she did not come home with the same amount of coins she had earned in Bursa, and what money she was able to make did not go quite as far. The ingredients for the Kemal Pasa were more expensive here, and the cheese much harder to find. He had already outgrown the clothing they had brought with them, and he knew that replacing them was an expense they could not afford. Despite the growth spurt, Yusuf was still small for his age, and thin as a rail, so he slipped easily among the crowds in the Grand Bazaar and elsewhere. Too many careless people wore their funds either tucked in their sleeves or in small pouches with leather lacings that were the work of a heartbeat to cut and abscond with. Each night, he presented his mother with a handful of coins he had earned while supposedly performing acrobatics in the street to draw attention to Bakir's stall, or had been given as tokens of appreciation for particularly fast deliveries. At first, his mother was pleasantly surprised, praising him for earning extra income. But as it happened more and more regularly, she grew concerned. One night she said to him, "Yusuf, tell me, and do not lie. You have not been hurting anyone to get these, have you?" Relieved at the phrasing, which enabled Yusuf to deftly sidestep the real issue and answer quite honestly, "I would never hurt anyone for money, Mama." She seemed to take him at his word, and didn't press further. One night, when the bazaar was lit with torches and several musicians were pounding nagaras and plugging sajas for coins, Yusuf wound his way through the crowd. He stood next to a tall woman dressed in a colourful, well-crafted kaftan and ferace. Clearly a woman of means. One hand, soft and clearly unused to physical labour, held tightly to that of a small child of perhaps 3 or 4. In her other arm, she cradled a baby. The older child stared raptly, then giggled and started stamping her feet and jumping up and down. Her mother's face shone brightly, and she swung her arm along with her daughter's capering. Thus distracted, she was the easiest target Yusuf had encountered all day, and he was in and out in the span of a breath. The purse was surprisingly heavy as he stashed it inside his shirt and manoeuvred to the edge of the crowd. A quick scamper, and he was out of the bustling major thoroughfare into a side street. He took a look around and, satisfied that he was alone, opened the pouch. It was too dark to see clearly, but Yusuf had taught himself how to recognize the coins by size and feel, and grinned. This would last him for weeks. He had just started to place the purse back in his shirt when a figure launched itself at him. Instinct caused him to whirl, and he almost struck a blow of his own before his much larger adversary knocked him to the ground. He landed hard with an oof as the wind rushed out of his lungs. Yusuf was pinned and couldn't see his attacker's face in the darkness of the alley, but that didn't stop him from struggling and flailing and trying to bite. "Oh, if I were older! What did you think you were doing out there?" The voice belonged to a boy, older than he and definitely bigger and heavier, but not yet an adult. Yusuf took the opportunity to attempt to knee the older boy in the groin. The other youth twisted out of the way, swearing, and the fight was on. Yusuf punched hard on the inside of the other boy's elbow, forcing it to bend, and the boy to lurch even further to the side. He then pounced atop him like a cat on a rat. Yusuf had not done much fighting. His size did not predispose him to it, but he was angry now, and he began to pummel the other boy with clenched fists. He felt one blow crunch the other's nose, and was rewarded with a sharp yelp, before the much larger adversary decided to quit toying with him. One big hand came up, closed around Yusuf's throat, and squeezed as the boy forced him over on his back. "You idiot! I'm trying to help you," the boy said, his voice thick from his bloodied nose. "I'm going to let go of you now, all right?" He was as good as his word, releasing Yusuf and moving quickly out of striking distance. Surprised curiosity chased away anger as Yusuf sat up, touching his neck experimentally. It didn't even hurt much. The two stared at each other in the dim light, panting. "You're Yusuf Tazim," the other said at last. "I'm Dawood bin Hassan." "How?" began Yusuf, but the other interrupted him. "I've been watching you," Dawood said. "That was a lucky blow. Do you have any cloth?" Yusuf did. It had been used throughout the day to carry deliveries of Kemal Pasa, and smelled faintly of the sweet as he passed it over to Dawood, who he realized wouldn't be smelling much of anything any time soon. Well, you attacked me first, Yusuf said, though he wanted to apologize, and knew as well as Davoud did that it was indeed a lucky blow. I was only trying to pin you. Davoud accepted the cloth and started to gingerly blot his bloody face. And why did you want to pin me if not to attack me or steal my money? Because it's not your money, is it? Yusuf had no response to that. It wasn't his money, but I give it to my mother, he said quietly. We need it. And the woman watching the dancing didn't, Davoud retorted. Her children didn't? She looked like she could spare some coins, Yusuf answered, somewhat defensively, as he recalled her well-made, attractive clothes. Just like you, Selim's children have no father. I don't know what happened to yours, but I know what happened to theirs. He was violent and cruel to them, and Selim fled in the night to escape. You took everything she had. You could see her fine clothes, but not the bruises on her face, eh? Shame washed through Yusuf, and he felt his face heat up. The purse was unusually heavy. Generally, those who went out in the market didn't carry quite so much money with them, as thefts weren't uncommon. I suppose you want me to give you the money I took from her. But how do I know you're not lying? I don't want you to give me the money. I want you to give it back to her. What I want from you is just you. I don't understand. The bazaar, Istanbul itself. It can be a difficult place if you are not wealthy or powerful, and it can be particularly dangerous for children. We all look out for each other. His nose had stopped bleeding, but even in the faint light, Yusuf could see it was a mess. Davoud started to hand the cloth back to him, but he waved it away. He was afraid he had broken the other boy's nose. He thought about the happy little girl dancing gracelessly but joyously to the music. He wondered if the story Davoud was telling was true, and if so, how long it had been since that girl had laughed. Obviously, you're already a fine cutpurse. I can teach you how to fight. Well, fight even better. Through the mask of blood on his face, Davoud smiled. There are things and people that are worth getting a bloody nose, and more for. And those who aren't. You need to be able to tell which is which, or else one day those light fingers of yours will steal from the wrong person. The whole thing sounded very strange and very suspicious, but it also made a lot of sense. Yusuf was well aware that Davoud could have killed him just now, and the boy had released him. Davoud got to his feet, towering over Yusuf by about a foot. Yusuf guessed he was about 13. Come on. I'll introduce you to Selim and her family, and you can give the money back, or, he said, you can leave right now. Yusuf made up his mind. Show me. An hour later, Yusuf walked home alone. His shirt was empty of coin, but his heart was full of satisfaction, and his head was full of ideas. He was excited to learn everything that Davoud could teach him. Cross-reference this Davoud bin Hassan with our database, came the soft, modulated female voice. Nothing. No ties to the assassins, at least none that we can determine. How odd. I had thought, given the significance of this memory, it might be when Yusuf was recruited. Too young at age 8, even for assassins, I suppose. Formally, perhaps. Still, this was enlightening. What's the next date? April 23rd, 1480. Regression. Constantinople, 1480. It was the Bayram of Hideraleth, the festival that marked the beginning of the spring and summer, and everyone in the city was happy. Though it specifically honoured the meeting of two prophets, Huzir and Ilyas, all members of the diverse population of Istanbul found something to celebrate in this Bayram that was all about making wishes, letting go of the old and welcoming the new, good health and fortune, and plenty of eating, dancing and music. Nalan had been working harder than ever to prepare enough Kemal Pasha for the celebrating throngs that crowded the bazaar, and the always genial Bekir bin Saleh, the vendor who oversaw several stalls and spaces in the bazaar, was practically radiating goodwill at the turnout. For once, Yusuf was kept too busy with legitimate deliveries to cut purses, but he would not have done so anyway. Hidireleth is about community, the now 18-year-old Davoud had told his group of young thieves, scouts, spies, and vigilantes. We won't start our new beginnings by making them bad for others. Yusuf agreed wholeheartedly. There was enough legitimate business going on in the bazaar anyway. The festivities went on well into the night. It was the small hours before the last few celebrants headed to their homes, sleepy, with full bellies, and perhaps a little the worse, or better, for alcohol. After Yusuf and his mother had retired to their modest lodgings, she surprised him by placing something wrapped in cloth on the small table. Today is a day for wishes and new beginnings, she said, and your father had a wish for you when you were ready. I think it is time. Yusuf's heart leapt. He sat down on the single bench, eyeing the mysterious bundle. A wish? What was it, Mother? That I tell you what I could of him, without betraying any oaths he made, and that I gift you with something that once belonged to him. Yusuf trembled with excitement, and as his mother spoke, he listened with not just his ears, but with every part of himself. I have always done what I do, she began. I prepare Kemal Pasa and sell it. Your father helped me, as you do now, but he did other things as well. Her dark eyes watched the small candle flame on the table, obviously wrestling with what she felt she could reveal to their only child, and what needed to remain secret. Exasperated, Yusuf grabbed his hair and pretended to tear at it. Mama, I am going to die of anticipation. Tell me before my hair goes grey, will you? She laughed then, and sitting down next to him, tousled his hair fondly. You are barely 13, still my little boy in so many ways. But, she added, as he rolled his eyes, also not in so many ways. You were saying he did other things, Yusuf prompted helpfully. He was no friend to the Ottomans, or to others who seek to dominate and control the people. She gave him a sly smile. My sweet little lion, do you think I do not know what you do when you are not in my sight? Yusuf blanched. How did she? You could not possibly earn what you do by simple deliveries or entertaining customers. I have seen you with Davoud and the others. You explore, you climb, you run along the rooftops. You give what you can to those you can. So did your father. What happened to him, Mama? She looked away, back at the leaping flames. He is dead, Yusuf. I have only a few things that were returned. She caught herself and clucked her tongue. I say too much, but these things are yours, now that you are of an age where they will fit you. You are not a little boy any more. Far from it, Yusuf thought, his pride slightly wounded. But any offence he felt was washed away by the look of pride commingled with sorrow on his mother's strong, beautiful face. He accepted the outstretched bundle, noting the length of teal-coloured silk cloth in which it was wrapped. Be careful as you unwrap it, his mother warned. Why? Is there a scorpion or viper hiding inside? No, but it might bite you nonetheless. He turned the last fold of cloth and stared at what was revealed. It seemed to be a bracer or gauntlet of some sort. The leatherworking was beautiful, and Yusuf picked it up carefully, mindful of his mother's warning. Turning it over, he saw that there was something attached to the underside. What is it? Your father called it a hook blade, his mother answered. There is a mechanism in it that will... Yusuf started as with a sharp sound. A piece of metal shot out from the end of the gauntlet. Ah, I see you found it, his mother finished wryly. There is a hook, as you can see, and there is a simple blade as well. How do I use it? Nalan's smile faded. I never saw them in use, she said. You know as much as I do now, but I think you were meant to know more." He looked up at her, the question in his dark grey eyes. Her own suddenly glinted in the candlelight, bright with unshed tears. "I was selfish, and somehow hoped that you would be content to live an ordinary life with me, and one day with a wife and children. I knew who and what your father was when we wed, and I cannot love you and deny the parts of him I see in you. You are not meant to stay with me, selling Kemal Pasa and working in the bazaar, any more than he was. Go and discover your father's legacy, my darling boy, who is now a man." He wanted to promise her he would be safe, that he wouldn't add the grief of his own death to that which he had already borne. But he couldn't lie to her. The night, the dark alleys, the looks on the faces of those who helped, and those he harmed, drew him too powerfully. So he did the best that he could to be a dutiful son in this moment. He rose and embraced her, realizing as he did so that somehow in the last year he had shot up to become half a head taller than her. Holding her so tightly, he feared he might crush her. He whispered in her ear, "I will be wise." It was all the reassurance he could offer. The night called, and he was anxious to learn, and to show off to Davoud. Very, very carefully, he experimented with how the hook blade functioned. Unlike the blade, it was a tool, not a weapon, and his quick mind started wondering just exactly how it worked. He was able to snag things off the ground as he wandered in the streets, mostly deserted now. It added almost a foot to his reach, so handholds that were impossible suddenly became so, and he found he could ascend much more quickly. Ascend, and perhaps descend as well. He made for one of the buildings where he remembered seeing the mysterious ropes, using the hook blade to climb swiftly atop the roof. His heart pounded in his chest, and he extended the new tool toward the rope. It fit over it exactly, as if the rope's thickness had been selected specifically to accommodate the curve of the hook. Yusuf's mouth was dry with excitement. This couldn't be coincidence. This was deliberate, and he wondered if perhaps his father had stood on this very roof years ago, using the blade his son now wore. He had to know what it was like, but it was a long fall, a very long fall. Gingerly, he reached out with the hook blade and snagged the rope. It took him a moment to work up his courage, but then he took a deep breath and stepped off the roof. Smoothly, swiftly, he sped along the rope. Several yards below, stone streets lay ready to break his bones should the hook slip or give way. The ride was dizzying, exhilarating, and far too brief. Before he knew it, his feet touched the roof of the shorter building. Yusuf struggled not to let out a whoop of sheer exultation. What a sensation! He had to feel it again. Grinning from ear to ear, this time he didn't fasten the hook on the rope slowly and carefully. He sprang, caught the line, and soared. He hoped that somehow his father could see him and was proud. "This is unusual," the woman said, as Emir drifted, caught between his present and Yusuf's past. "Using an assassin's weapon at 13 so efficiently with no training. Remarkable. This weapon and this little gang he's running with, all the evidence we've gathered suggests they're extremely important to who he will become. And who he becomes has an effect on one of the most important assassins we know of to date," mused the woman. "Ezio Auditore. Is there anything else we should see before we go to their first encounter?" "There does seem to be something important about 2 years on. Hang on, let me get the exact date." Regression. Constantinople, 1482. Yusuf was both tremendously excited and terribly nervous. In the 7 years since he had first met Davoud in the alley and learned of the older boy's odd organization of the bazaar's children, they had had many adventures and close calls. Davoud, whose nose had never healed quite right after that memorable first encounter, had kept his word. He had taught Yusuf how to fight, both fairly and sneakily. He had introduced him to the other members of the group, Children, all at the time, though some of them, like Davoud and Yusuf himself, who was now second only to Davoud, had grown up. Some of them had left the city or moved to other areas of it, but he and Davoud stayed to look out for the interests of the bazaar community in ways that the merchants themselves could not. Tonight, they would perform that duty in a way they had never done before. They would not be throwing small smoke bombs to cause distractions, or stealing coins in a crowd, or even defacing property. Tonight, they would be breaking into a private residence and stealing whatever they could smuggle out. Their hands had been forced. Vendors, like the kindly Bakir, rented their stalls from others who owned the spaces. Rent was steep, but that was understood. It was a prime place to sell in the greatest city in the world. But in the last week, a stranger, riding in a palanquin and wearing the finest silks, had made his way through the bazaar, turning cold, appraising eyes on certain stalls. And the next thing the stunned merchants learned was that their rent was about to quadruple. There was nothing they could do, a heartbroken Nalan had told her distraught and furious son. "Poor Bakir is sobbing. He has run his business out of that stall for a dozen years, and now he has to leave." "What if we could meet the price?" Yusuf had asked. She'd laughed bitterly. "Even if you could cut that many purses, my light-fingered boy, you would not have time to do so. We will need to be out in 5 days." At the thunder in his face, she added, "We are luckier than most. There are other souks in the city, and everyone likes Kemal Pasha. We'll be all right." They might land on their feet, but not everyone else would. What would become of friendly Bakir and the others who could not readily ply their trades elsewhere? Fortunately, Davoud agreed with Yusuf, and they hatched the scheme they were now about to enact. They had sent some of the younger children to act as beggars in the area near the new owner's lodgings, and to follow him unobtrusively as he went about his business. That night, one of them reported that the owner, who was obviously not Turkish, would be dining out and not returning until well into the small hours. He was staying, unsurprisingly, in the best part of town, an area near the Topkapi Palace, though not thankfully within its walls. It was a private residence, and there were a pair of guards out front and a few servants within. As planned, a group of children began to distract the guards long enough for the pair of young robbers to maneuver toward the back and hide themselves amid the flowering trees of a private garden. While the guards tried to chase away the children, it was the work of a moment for Yusuf to activate his hook blade, ascend to an upper-story window, open it, and lower a rope down for his friend. Once Davoud had climbed up, they pulled the rope into the room and closed the shutters so that no passing guard below would notice anything amiss. Voices floated up from the rooms below, idle conversations from servants who were taking advantage of the fact that their master was not home to gossip and relax. Any theft would have to be conducted upstairs, and Yusuf, who had the ability to do many things at the same time, listened with half an ear to the chatter below while he and Davoud searched the upstairs rooms. Yusuf tried to be nonchalant about what he beheld, although he had never seen such luxuries in his short life. Silks and furs decorated the rooms. There were carved heavy chairs, not benches, and drawers filled with jewellery, and ornate clothes with gems sewn into them. He went right to work, using his blade to separate the gems from the fabric, while Davoud scoured the rooms for coins and other smaller portable riches. They had several merchants who knew people and would be able to liquidate the gems and small valuables quickly. "This is unbelievable," Yusuf murmured as he picked up a small alabaster carving and thrust it into his sack. His eye fell on a small, wickedly sharp dagger. The hilt was covered with gold and dotted with rubies, and the sheath was made of buttery soft leather. He tossed it to Davoud, who caught it deftly. "Here, for you, for now," he said. "You are so jealous of my hook blade." Davoud grinned. For the next several minutes they scoured the large room, shaking their heads at the vast amount of wealth. "We should think about doing this more frequently," Yusuf said. "I have enough in my bag alone to cover the increased rent for a year, maybe 2 or 3. "No," Davoud said. "It would attract too much attention. We had to do it this time, but it's best if we keep to the shadows.
Don't get greedy, Yusuf. It'll get you every...
The word died on his lips as they heard the door open below and conversation floated up. Their gazes locked and their eyes flew open wide. Yusuf turned at once towards the window, cracking the shutters and peering down into the garden below, where a guard, dressed like none he had ever seen before, stood. There would be no chance of escaping via rope until he moved.
"We're stuck here," he whispered, "at least for now."
Davoud nodded.
"Keep watch. Maybe they won't come upstairs right away."
"I am glad all is proceeding well," came a voice. It was a thick accent, and though Yusuf couldn't place it, he took an immediate dislike to it. "The Templars have always had eyes in the bazaar, of course. The assassins are not the only ones who can hide in plain sight if need be. But now we have permanent stalls." Raucous laughter floated up. Davoud and Yusuf stared at each other, horrified. Was the cold-eyed new owner of the stalls setting up some kind of spy ring? Assassins? Templars? He had never heard the terms before. But they did seem to mean something to Davoud. The older youth paled, and he was trembling.
"Davoud?"
Yusuf said, but Davoud lifted a finger to his lips. He touched his ear, indicating that Yusuf should keep listening, then went to the window to peer at the guard for himself. What he saw seemed to shake him even more. The conversation continued. "You are poised to become one of the wealthiest men in the city," the first speaker continued. "One of," said the new stall owner. "I think the Sultan might have just a few more coins," the first speaker said. "Regardless, this calls for a celebration." "Well, since I am about to become at least one of the richest men in Constantinople, let me share a vintage I have kept for this occasion. It is upstairs, in my room. I lock it in there because one can never trust servants. A moment while I fetch it."
"Go,"
said Davoud suddenly. He turned to face the door, slipping the sheath off the narrow dagger Yusuf had jokingly handed to him. "Take the bags. You're much quicker than I am, and you have your blade. You can get away. I can't. I'll stall them as long as I can."
"Davoud!"
They both heard booted feet coming up the stairs.
"The merchants are counting on you," Davoud hissed. "So much I wish I'd time to tell you, but... Go! Stay alive! Keep to the shadows! Protect the bazaar!"
Yusuf stood, rooted to the spot. The door opened, and everything seemed to happen at once. With a cry, Davoud launched himself on the new owner, raising the dagger and plunging it downward. Despite his surprise, the hard-eyed man pivoted just in time, so that the blade went into his shoulder instead of his chest. Grimly, he pulled out the dagger with his right hand, impossibly seizing Davoud's hair with his left, despite his wound, and pulling down hard, turning the boy so he faced Yusuf. Horrified, Yusuf stared into his friend's eyes as Davoud shouted, "Run!" The stall owner lifted the dagger and brought it plunging down. Crimson. All Yusuf saw was crimson. The blood spurting from his friend's pierced throat. The red cross on the ring that adorned a murderer's hand. Yusuf wanted more than anything to stay and fight, to die alongside his friend. But that choice had been taken from him. Davoud had bought him for the merchants and their families with his own life. Sobbing, Yusuf did as Davoud wanted. He fled, taking both bags, leaping out into the night and using the blade bequeathed to him by his father to escape to safety, while his friend bled out on the beautiful rug. The next day, the hard-eyed man was found dead, and the deal to purchase the stalls mysteriously fell through. Yusuf didn't know what happened. All he knew was that he would spend his life doing what his friend had died for. He would stay in the shadows and protect those who could not protect themselves, and he would watch and wait for other men wearing the Red Cross. Subject: Moussa. "He's always difficult," a male voice said. "Moussa or Baptiste?" the calm, almost caring female voice inquired. "Both." "I don't disagree with you. They are both complex individuals." Baptiste will make the regression even more complicated if his memories are affected by certain toxins. Memories are always tricky, even without chemical alterations, the female voice said. We know that. They're never entirely accurate. We don't see what's really there. We only see what he sees. As I said, he's always difficult. Begin regression, the woman said. Regression. Saint-Domingue, 1758. Drumming. The sound of drumming, forbidden to them when they were property owned by others, was the sound of liberty to the Maroons of Saint-Domingue. Francois Macandal had known this well, and he had taught this truth to those he had trained and liberated. Had taught that, and so much more, to the man who now surveyed the dozens of Macandal's followers, who danced and drank before him in their base deep in the jungle. Baptiste took another swig of rum as he watched. There were 3 bonfires, one in the centre of the clearing and 2 smaller ones over to the sides. The dark, sweat-glistened skin of the dancers gleamed as it caught the light. Baptiste had known many of the dancers since he was 13, when he and Agate had run away from their lives as slaves to join Macandal in his passionate, angry search for liberty and vengeance, when they had become full members of the Assassin Brotherhood. Agate, with whom he had grown up on the plantation and had fought beside. Baptiste had always expected that they would die beside one another. Never had he thought he would witness what Agate had done earlier today. The recollection knotted his stomach, and he made a sour face. He took another drink, deeper this time, trying and failing to dull the combination of shock, white-hot fury, and shamefully pain that stirred in his heart at the thought of the other man. Agate. The 2 men had been as close as brothers once. But the 3rd plantation slave Macandal had selected for training, she had ruined that closeness. Macandal had come to the plantation in secret, by night, and no one had betrayed him. Those who could, those who dared, managed to sneak away to meetings where he taught them about the life they could have away from the plantation, away from slavery. At first, he only spoke, told them about his own life, free to do as he pleased. Then he taught the eager slaves how to read and write. "Much I will share with those who are worthy," he had promised, "but this may be the most powerful weapon I give you." She had liked that, skittish little Jeanne. And she had liked Agate, too. Baptiste had caught them holding hands once, and he had laughed at them, warning that Macandal would not be pleased. "You're not strong enough," he had told Jeanne scornfully. "All you do is keep Agate from his training." "Training?" she had asked, looking at them both. "For what?" Baptiste had scowled and dragged his brother off to their private meeting with Macandal. "She will never be an assassin," he told Agate. "She is not one of us. Not really. Not in her heart." Macandal realized it too, after a time. She learned how to read and write, but nothing more. He never invited Jeanne to participate in the real training. It filled Baptiste with pride to realize that Macandal, a former slave, one who was even missing an arm due to a childhood accident with a sugarcane press, had not only managed to escape, but could lead others, and win. In this special training, Baptiste and Agate learned how to use weapons, and how to attack without them. How to mix poisons, and how to deliver them, as powder in drinks, as a thick coating on darts. The pair of boys learned how to kill, openly and from the shadows, even as Macandal demonstrated how to do so with only one arm. And when at last they escaped the plantation, leaving the cowardly Jeanne behind, they did kill. The drums grew louder, drawing Baptiste's thoughts from the happy past to the solemn present. Tonight, he, Baptiste, would lead the ritual. This too Macandal had taught him. Voodoo. Not the true ritual of it, no, but the trappings, the power of symbol, and the power of what was not magic, but appeared to be. "Let them fear you," Macandal said. "Those who hate you, even those who love you, especially
those who love you.
Tonight's ceremony would change everything. It had to, or all that Mackandal had fought for, all Baptiste and, once upon a time, Agate had fought for, would fall apart. The celebrants had drunk deeply of the rum he had handed out, unaware that there was more in their cups than alcohol. Soon they would be ready for the ritual, ready to see things they would not otherwise see, to believe things they would otherwise question, to do things they would otherwise not do. The drumming increased, climbing to an almost frantic crescendo, and there was a bawling, bellowing sound off to one side. The bull that was led out had a wreath of flowers around his massive neck. He was drugged and calm, and would not struggle. Baptiste rose, his powerful fingers curling around the hilt of his machete. He was a large, well-muscled man, and he had done this before for Mackandal's rights. He leapt lithely down from the platform and strode to the beast. Earlier, by his command, it had been bathed and anointed with perfumes stolen from former masters. Now it turned its horned head, peering at him with wide, dilated eyes. He patted its shoulder, and it grunted, as placid as an old cow. Gripping his machete, Baptiste turned to his people.
It is time to begin the rite. We will make an offering to the Loa and invite them to come to us, to tell us what the Brotherhood must do to go forward.
The words hurt as they left his lips. Mackandal. For 20 years, from age 13 to 33, Baptiste and Agate had fought at his side. They had learned their mentor's version of the Assassin's Creed. One, he had assured them as they listened to him raptly, that was not watered down with misplaced ideals like mercy and compassion. These were weaknesses, not strengths. No one was really innocent. Everyone was either with you or against you. Everyone was a Templar or an assassin, in one way or another. A master who did not beat a slave was still a master, an owner, and even those who did not own slaves could still do so by law. Therefore they were guilty. They served the Templars, even if they were unaware of it. They had no place in Mackandal's world, nor in Baptiste's. And so it was that Baptiste, and the others who had now stopped their dancing and had turned to face him, had attempted a few nights ago to poison the colonists with whom they were forced to share this island. But they had failed, and their leader had paid the price for them.
Francois Mackandal was our mentor, our brother. He inspired us and led by example, and he died without betraying us. Died in torment, his body taken by the fire.
Roars went up. They were drunk and drugged and angry, but they were listening to him. That was good. It was Baptiste's plan that soon they would do even more. He continued.
And in this time of grief and anger, one who was my brother, your brother, has left us as well. He was not killed in a struggle, nor did he suffer the flames. He simply left us. Left us! Agate has fled like a coward instead of carrying on the legacy Francois Mackandal bought with his life.
More roaring. Oh yes, they were angry. They were almost as angry as Baptiste.
But I am here as your Hungan, your priest, to plead to the Loa for their wisdom. I have not abandoned you. I will never abandon you.
He drew his hand back. The long steel blade of the machete caught the firelight. And then Baptiste brought it down, quickly, cleanly, putting all the strength of his body into the blow. Blood fountained from the creature's slashed throat. It tried to make sounds, but could not. The earth beneath it turned red and spongy with the bull's life fluid, but it died quickly. Probably more swiftly than it would have in a plantation owner's abattoir, Baptiste thought, certainly in less pain due to the drug. He wiped the blade on the beast's hide, then dipped his fingers into the hot blood, marking his face with it. He raised his hands in invitation, and they surged forward now, Mackandal's people, anointing themselves with crimson, placing death on their bodies as it had touched their souls. Later, the corpse would be roasted at the central large bonfire. Machetes would be used to carve off hunks of delicious, juicy meat. The living would continue to live through death. But before then, Baptiste had a plan. Once everyone assembled had bloodied themselves with the sacrifice, Baptiste announced,
"I will drink of the potion, and ask the lower to come to me. They will, as they have done before."
They had not, of course, nor had they come to Mackandal, although both men had experienced some interesting hallucinations. The mixture he prepared was lethal at a certain dose, unsettling but harmless when lower amounts were ingested. And Baptiste was a master at knowing exactly how much to use for what purpose. Now he crushed some fragrant herbs between his hands, smelling the clean, fresh scent mingled with blood, and then produced, seemingly out of nowhere, a small bottle of the toxin. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Baptiste hid a smile. He was a master at sleight of hand. He brandished it and cried,
"Tonight, with death so close to our memory, I offer the death of this powerful bull to the Gede Loa. Who will come to speak through me to offer wisdom tonight? Who will tell us what Mackandal's people should do?"
And he downed the bitter draught in a gulp. It was but 3 breaths later that the world began to change. Colours shifted, seemed to shimmer. There was drumming, but no one was striking the drums, and the sound was distorted and mixed with what might have been screams of ecstasy or torment. The noise increased, became overwhelming, and Baptiste grunted in pain and clapped his hand to his ears. Then he realized where the sound was coming from. It was his own heart, slamming against his ribs, crying out to break loose. And then it did break loose, tearing through his chest, lying on the earth in front of him, red and pulsing and reeking of hot blood. Baptiste stared down at the hole it had torn in his body, aghast.
"It's the poison. I took too much. I'm going to die."
Fear surged through him. Stupidly, knowing this all to be an illusion, he reached out and grabbed his still-beating heart. It slipped through his bloody hands like a fish, flopping about, eluding him as he raced for it.
"It's never been like this. The dream state." "That's because this isn't a dream," came a voice, smooth and thick with humour that might or might not be cruel.
Baptiste lifted his eyes to see the skeleton laughing at him, and screamed. He clawed at his eyes, forcing himself to see clearly, but even as his vision sharpened, the images didn't depart. The skeleton's body slowly transformed, putting on flesh and formal clothing, looking like one of the fine, wealthy plantation owners, if a plantation owner had black skin and a skull for a head.
"Baron Samedi," breathed Baptiste. "You asked to be ridden by a Loa, my friend," the Baron replied in a silky voice. "You need to be careful who you invite to the party."
In voodoo, the Loa were the intermediary spirits between humans and the distant god Bondi. The Gede Loa were spirits of the dead, and their leader was the lord of the graveyard, Baron Samedi. Now that Loa strode up to the kneeling, shivering assassin and reached out a hand.
"I think you look better with my face rather than bull blood," he said. "You wear it from now on, yes?"
Baptiste reached up his bloodied hands to touch his face. He felt no warm, living flesh, only dry bone. The skull peering down at him grinned. Baptiste closed his eyes and rubbed at them frantically, whimpering as his fingers dug into empty sockets. His face. Baron Samedi had taken his face.
"Don't be a child, Baptiste. You know better. You made this potion yourself. This is only a hallucination. Open your eyes."
He did. The Baron was still there, grinning. And beside him stood Mackandal. Baptiste's mentor looked as he did in life, tall, muscular, proud and strong, a decade or so older than Baptiste. As in life, he was missing his left arm.
"Mackandal," breathed Baptiste.
Tears sprung to his eyes, joy, relief and wonder. Still on his knees on the bloody earth, he reached out a hand to his mentor, to grasp at the robes he wore. His hands touched something soft, not fabric, and passed through it. Baptiste fell backward, staring, shocked at a hand covered with soot.
I died, burned by those who should have died by my hand, Mackandal said.
It was his voice, and his mouth moved, but the words seemed to float in the air around the mentor, like smoke, twisting around Baptiste's head, into his ears, his mouth, his nostrils.
I am breathing his ashes, Baptiste thought.
His stomach churned, as it had done earlier, and he began to retch. A snake emerged from his mouth, thick as his arm, black and glistening with Baptiste's saliva, undulating as it emerged from his body. When at last he had vomited forth the serpent's tail, the reptile slithered over to the spectre of Mackandal. He reached down and picked it up, placing it across his shoulders. Its tongue flickered, and its small eyes watched Baptiste.
The serpent is wise, not evil, Baron Samedi said. It knows when it is time to change its skin, so that it might grow larger and stronger than it was before. Are you ready to change your skin, Baptiste?
No, he cried, but he knew it was useless. Baron Samedi stepped back, doffing his formal hat to Mackandal, to reveal that his skull was as devoid of hair as his face was of flesh.
You summoned us, Baptiste, Mackandal said. You told our people you would never abandon them. Now that I am dead, they need a leader.
I will lead them, Mackandal, I swear, Baptiste stammered. I will not flee from whatever you would have me do. I am not a Gate.
No, you are not, Mackandal replied. But neither will you lead them. I will lead them.
But you are... Mackandal began to dissolve into smoke, the snake around his shoulders vanishing with him. The smoke hovered like mist, then formed itself into tendrils and began to waft toward Baptiste. Suddenly, Baptiste understood what was about to happen, and he tried to get to his feet. Abruptly, the Baron appeared behind him. Strong hands, flesh, not bone, but even so, as cold as the grave, clamped down on Baptiste's shoulders, and he couldn't move. The thin wisps of smoke drifted to his ears and nostrils, seeking entrance. Baptiste clenched his jaws shut, but Baron Samedi clucked his tongue.
He
chided, and tapped Baptiste's tightly pressed lips with his skull-headed cane. Baptiste's mouth opened, and the smoke entered. And he was both himself and Mackandal. 3 more tasks, then we shall lead them. Baptiste stared at the machete he had dropped. It lay beside his still beating heart. With a strange detachment, he understood that he did not need his heart. It was better to not care, to not feel love or hope for others. Only his own desires, his own needs mattered. And so he left his heart where it was. But he picked up the machete. He lifted it slowly in his right hand and extended his left arm. Part of him screamed not to do this, that he could lead just as well himself. But another part of him, not Mackandal, not Baron Samedi, wanted this. Besides, the drug would help with the pain. Baptiste lifted the machete, took a deep breath, and with a single blow severed his left arm just above the elbow. Blood seemed to explode from the wound, spurting wildly. But he was right. It didn't hurt. His amputated limb fell to the earth and turned into a serpent, this one crawling toward the skull-faced lower. Inside his head, Mackandal whispered, "Very good. Now you are like me. You are no longer Baptiste. You will be Francois Mackandal. They have seen your gesture. They know I ride you like they might ride a horse. Usually, the lowers leave when they are done. I'm not leaving." Calmly, Baptiste tugged at the sash tied around his waist. By himself, he tied off the spurting wound before the lack of blood could kill him. After all, unlike the Baron, he was still alive. Baron Samedi nodded in approval.
Good. He is with you, now and always. I will be, too.
He tapped his jawbone.
Wear my face, Macandal.
Baptiste nodded. He understood, and he agreed. From this moment on, the rumours would spread. Macandal was not dead, people would whisper. He had escaped burning at the stake. He was here, and he was full of hatred and vengeance. And from this moment on, Baptiste would never be seen again. He was still himself, yes, but his name would be Macandal, and his face would wear, painted in white that would stand out starkly against his black skin, the bony visage of the grinning Baron Samedi. Subject: Lynn. Lynn listened to Dr. Sophia Ricken as she explained patiently for the third time that Lynn needed to go into the animus of her own free will. Lynn folded her arms, staring, not answering. "I know what happened to you last time was traumatic," Sophia said. Her wide blue eyes were kind but distant. There was compassion in their depths, but not true empathy. "You know nothing," Lynn replied. Traumatic was a thoroughly inadequate term, a bloodless, clinical word for what Lin's ancestor, a concubine-turned-assassin named Xiao Jun, had been forced to witness 500 years ago, and what Lin had been forced to witness in the present day. 5 years old. Xiao Jun had been 5 years old when the then new emperor, born Zhu Haoshao, and now known as the Zhengda Emperor, had ordered the execution of a eunuch who had conspired against him. Liu Jin had been the leader of a powerful group of eunuchs in the court known as the 8 Tigers, but he had been betrayed by them, as he had betrayed his emperor. For the dreadful act of treason, Zhengda had ordered that Liu be made to suffer a fate equally dreadful, the death by 1,000 cuts. There had been in actuality well over 3,000 cuts made by the time it was all over. The gruesome event had lasted for 3 days. Fortunately for Liu, he had died on the second day, after only about 300 or 400 cuts. Onlookers could purchase a piece of the man's flesh for a mere qian to be eaten with rice wine. Lin could not get the image out of her mind for days. Sophia's concerned face hovering over her as Lin spasmed and screamed on the floor of the animus room became inextricably entwined with the horror. Even now, as Lin looked at the woman, she wanted to vomit. "I hope you understand that much of the time we're as ignorant about what you'll experience as you are," Sophia continued. "How reassuring." "The reports say that you're doing well," Sophia said warmly. "I'd like to go back in. After the last regression, we scoured through as many other sources as are available to us, and I believe this time we found a memory that's important for us to know, but not quite so—" She groped for the word, then, in a moment of sincerity, blurted, "Horrifying." Lin didn't respond. Her captors, for that was the only way she could think of them, knew more about Xiao Jun than she did at this point. More than anything, Lin did not want to go back into that poor girl's body, a child who was a concubine to one of the worst playboys in Chinese history. No, that wasn't entirely correct. More than anything, Lin wanted to keep her sanity, and she knew that they would send her in, regardless of whether she wanted to go, regardless of whether the memory was horrifying. Sophia Ricken might want to believe she was inviting Lin to re-enter the horrible machine, but both women knew she wasn't. She was telling Lin. The only choice Lin had was how she would comply, willingly or not. After a long moment, she said, "I will go." Regression, Beijing, 1517. Summer was coming to Beijing, but it was not yet time for the court to relocate to the summer palace. Dim lanterns cast flickering light over the forms of dozens of women, none of them older than 30, who slumbered fitfully in the nice, stifling heat. The ornately carved wooden ceiling of the vast room The largest of 9 in the 1,400-square-yard palace of heavenly purity was lost to view in the darkness, but the light still caught glimmers of dragons painted in gold leaf and the gleam of ornate but locked doorknobs. 12-year-old Xiao Jun eased open the massive door and moved quietly over the black marble floor. The palace was the largest of the 3 located in the Forbidden City's inner court, the residence of the Zhengda Emperor, his empress, and his favoured concubines. Xiao Jun had been born here to another concubine who had not survived the ordeal. If any place was her home, this was, with its exquisite carved ceilings, large comfortable beds, and the murmur of women as they learned the fine arts of their stations, dancing, playing instruments, embroidery, and even how to walk, move, and laugh appealingly. Such she had learned too, but early on her talent for almost unnaturally beautiful dance and phenomenal acrobatic skills had attracted the attention of the young Zhengda Emperor, who had at once put her to good use, spying on his enemies and playing amusing tricks on his friends. Xiao Jun tried very hard not to wake Zhang as she climbed carefully into the large bed they shared with 2 others, but she failed. Zhang murmured sleepily, "One day you will come to bed with the rest of us, and we will all die from astonishment." Jun laughed softly. "No, I do not think that will happen." Yawning, Zhang made room for her and sleepily pillowed her head on her friend's shoulder. In the lantern-lit darkness, Jun smiled. Singled out and put to work by Zhengda as early as she had been, 3 for her tumbling, Xiao Jun had always been the object of hostility, veiled and otherwise, from her fellow concubines. She'd risen swiftly, despite a comparatively low birth, whereas many of the hundreds Zhengda kept in the 3 harem buildings had only seen the Son of Heaven from a distance. So, when Zhang, the daughter of a palace guard, had been brought into the harem a year ago, the epitome of womanly Chinese perfection, with her small, bound breasts and feet, demure manners, shell-pale skin and large, soft eyes, Jun had assumed she would be just like the others. Instead, once she heard about Xiao Jun, Zhang had sought out the other girl. Due to her experience as the Emperor's favourite spy, Jun was particularly mindful of the false faces the court and other concubines could display. At first, she had been cautious and closed-mouthed. Zhang seemed to understand and did not press, but gradually something strange happened. Even though they were in competition for the attention of the Emperor, whose approval could quite literally mean a life of luxury and comfort, or a horrifically brutal death, Zhang never seemed to see it as such. Once, she made an offhand comment that struck Jun poignantly. "There is no one who moves as you do, Xiao Jun," she had said, admiringly, after Jun had bested her for the court's approval of the ribbon dance. "That is why I simply watch and enjoy, like everyone else." "But you are so beautiful, Zhang," Jun had exclaimed, gesturing at her own feet and chest, which had never been bound. Zhengda had forbidden it. "You are too good at hiding and climbing," he had said. Without the binding, Jun knew men would never think of her as attractive. "I could never be like you either," Zhang had laughed. "Your tumbling and my smile are like a rabbit and a butterfly," she said, mentioning 2 creatures particularly loved by the Chinese. Both were valued, and neither was better than the other. They were simply different. She understands, Xiao Jun thought, and had to turn away, lest anyone see the quick tears of joy that sprang to her eyes. They had become like sisters since then, and now, as Zhang lay next to her, she said, as she always did, "Tell me." It was both pleasure and pain for Jun to tell the stories, because she knew, as Zhang did, that they would never be for the older girl. This butterfly was in a cage, like a cricket, but the rabbit was free. Once, Jun had tried to show Zhang her world. It had been a few months ago, before third watch, when soldiers in the drum tower would strike the 13 kettle drums to rouse the household in preparation for the daily audience. The concubines, of course, did not need to rise, but the eunuchs, the court officials and their staffs all had to be ready to meet with the Emperor at 4 a.m., and this audience would be repeated twice more during the day. Zhengda hated it, of course, He had proposed a single audience at night, with a banquet afterward. But even an emperor, it seemed, could not have all his desires met. The idea was met with vehement opposition. It was the optimal time, Jun knew, to sneak out of the quarters and explore. And so she and Zhang had. Many of the eunuchs were asleep at their posts, and Jun was easily able to trick or distract the others. They had slipped outside into the streets, where Zhang stared up at the star-crowded night sky, something she had never seen. Always before, if the concubines were permitted to be out at night for a festival or other event, the lanterns around them hid the shyest of the stars. They pressed on. Jun had discovered many hidden passages over the years, but Zhang was too nervous to crawl through them, laden with cobwebs and dust as they were. Jun pressed, promising to help her, but Zhang blushed and simply said, "My feet." Jun felt as though she had been struck a blow in the stomach. She had forgotten the other reason why concubines and high-born women of the court had their feet bound, so they would never run away with another man. Sickly, she looked at her friend, to see her own sorrow reflected back in Zhang's soft eyes. They had returned, and Jun had never suggested it again. But Zhang was determined to escape her gilded cage, if only vicariously through Xiaojun's adventures, and, as now, often asked her friend to tell her stories. Jun listened, but the other girls in the bed appeared to be sleeping deeply. One of them was even snoring lightly. Jun began to whisper, for Zhang's ears alone. "Tonight," she said, "I performed in the Baofang." "Were there leopards?" Zhang asked. The name meant Leopard's Chamber, and Zheng Da had ordered it built outside the Forbidden City to house exotic animals and acrobatic and dance performances. It was also a good place to eavesdrop, but Jun withheld that bit of information. It might put Zhang in danger, and Jun would never do that. "Not tonight," Jun replied. "But there were 2 lions and 7 tigers." Zhang giggled, covering her mouth with her hand to stifle the sound. "There are 7 tigers here too," she said. Jun did not smile. The most important and powerful eunuchs in court had been known as the 8 tigers. As Zhang noted, they were 7 now. Jun had been forced to watch their leader, Liu Jin, undergo an excruciatingly painful death. Zhang didn't know that either. "There are," Jun simply agreed, and continued, describing in detail the powerful muscles of the big cats and the gold and orange-black beauty of their coats, how frightening they were to the court, and how exciting it had been for Jun to perform a routine right above their cages, where she could fall at any minute. "And last night?" Zhang had been asleep last night, so Jun obligingly told her that last night Zheng Da had indulged in one of his favorite pastimes. "I know you heard about it," she teased. Zhang punched her playfully. "But I wasn't there." "All right. He had the market set up again last night, and this time he pretended to be a commoner from outside Nanjing. He had Ma Yongsheng be a mushroom farmer, while Wei Bin sold silk." The idea of these powerful men pretending to be ordinary farmers and merchants, while he himself was a humble customer, amused Zheng Da greatly. It did not, however, amuse those members of the court forced to perform such roles, especially not any of the 8 tigers. "What about Gao Fang? He sold snails." Zhang buried her face in the pillow to stifle her laughter. Jun grinned too. She had to admit, watching these proud men gritting their teeth through the performance was a sight to behold. "And you?" "Me? I helped cook noodles." "Tell me more," sighed Zhang happily. Her lids were closing again. Jun did, describing more of the silliness, speaking softly and steadily until Zhang's breathing became slow and regular. Sleep did not come so easily for Jun. Zheng Da had told her he was curious about the fighting going on in the north, to repel some of the raiding expeditions led by the Mongol warlord Dayan Khan. "Maybe I will do so in secret," he had said, warming to the idea the more he spoke about it. "I need another name, just like I do for the market. What do you think of Zhou Shao?" "As my emperor wishes. I am sure it is a fine name, she had answered promptly. But he wasn't done. I will need my clever little kitten Xiao Zhun to wander around the campsites and listen for me, he had told her. Although it could be argued that by following her emperor to battle, Zhun would be in a more dangerous position than Zhang, Zhun couldn't help but think the opposite. Zhang wasn't stupid, but there was an innocence, a vulnerability inherent in her nature that Zhun thought she herself had never had. Like the cat Zheng Da sometimes called her, she always seemed to land on her feet. There was plotting afoot with the 8 tigers, and cunning and deception among the concubines. She did not like the thought of abandoning Zhang to that, but she did not have a choice, not this time. If the Son of Heaven wanted her to accompany him while he attacked the Mongols, she would have to go. A fierce protectiveness rose in Xiao Zhun as she watched her friend sleep peacefully. This I vow, Zhang, my best friend, my only friend. If you need me, I will come, no matter what, no matter where. I will come for you and keep you safe. No threat, no imperial order, nothing will keep me from you if ever you need me. Ever. And as if she somehow could hear the words that Xiao Zhun spoke only in her heart, Zhang smiled in her sleep. Acknowledgments. Many thanks must go out, as always, to my hard-working agent, Lucien Diver. I'm also grateful to the terrific team at Ubisoft, Caroline Lamache, Anthony Marcantonio, Anouk Bachman, Richard Ferrezi, and especially Emir Azizia, whom I pestered mercilessly and who always replied promptly and cheerfully. I must also acknowledge the talents of director Justin Kurzel and actors Michael Fassbender, Marion Cotillard, and Jeremy Irons, who provided so much inspiration during the writing of this book. This audiobook was produced and published by Penguin Random House, recording copyright 2016. Copyright Ubisoft Entertainment.